Up on Network Africa, thousands of Palestinians and foreign nationals flocked towards the Rafah crossing, hoping to make it across the Egyptian border from Gaza. Sudan marks 6 months since the start of a conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, which has killed thousands of people. Plus, ECOWAS warns against post-election violence in Liberia as President George Weah and opposition candidate Joseph Boakai are neck and neck in preliminary results. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers. We begin this week with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Israel's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi hosted U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Sunday, discussing the Israel-Hamas conflict. During the meeting, President al-Sisi said that Israel's reaction to Hamas' attack has gone beyond self-defense and amounts to collective punishment. Mr. Sisi also said he rejects the targeting of any civilians in the ongoing conflict. Egypt added that it has stepped up diplomatic efforts to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. After the meeting, Mr. Blinken said that the Egyptian-controlled border crossing into Gaza will reopen, and the U.S. is working with Egypt, Israel, and the United Nations to get assistance through it.
We have put in place, and Egypt has put in place, a lot of material support for people in Gaza. And Rafah will be open. We're putting in place with the United Nations, with Egypt, with Israel, with others, the mechanism by which to get the assistance in.
In the meantime, representatives of the Red Crescent in North Sinai received shipments of aid from the National Alliance for Civil Development Action after its arrival to Arish City, waiting for passage into Gaza. The convoy includes approximately 106 locomotives loaded with huge quantities of humanitarian aid. The National Alliance for Civil Development Action convoy includes 1,000 tons of food and meat and 40,000 blankets. The aid also includes more than 50,000 pieces of clothing and more than 300,000 boxes of medicines and medical supplies to support the people in Gaza. Still on Sunday, a few hundred Tunisians protested in Tunis in support of Gaza and were joined by Palestinians living in the North African country. Some Palestinians originally from Gaza marched along with the protesters while wearing the Palestinian black and white keffiyeh, as others held signs and waved Palestinian flags. Gaza has been subject to some of the fiercest bombing it has ever seen, part of Israel's response to a surprise attack by Hamas on October the 7th. In neighboring Morocco, thousands also marched in Rabat on Sunday in support of the Palestinians under siege in Gaza in the biggest anti-Israel protest since the 2020 normalization of diplomatic relations.
In the meantime, crowds of people wanting to leave Gaza have gathered at the Rafah border crossing after earlier reports suggested it could be temporarily reopened. However, at the moment, the crossing remains closed. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken had said the crossing would be reopened after his meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Rafah, which is on the border between Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and Hamas-governed Gaza, is the only crossing into the territory not controlled by Israel. In the meantime, 8 trucks are lined up in Egypt's Al Arish city as they await permission to move to Rafah border for crossing over.
Came to visit my family. My sister, my brother, and I just like before the war, like couple days, and I want to spend like two weeks with my family here and enjoy. I enjoy here with the word. With the word, I can't sleep. Lot of bomb, no water, no food, no nothing, no life here, no life. I don't know how they're thinking about people. All over the world, they have like country, people live, they go visit family, they go everywhere. That's Gaza Strip in Palestine. This is like they think it's not people here. These people here live. It's not life.
In the meantime, a security and NGO source in Al Arish said that 8 trucks are still waiting there for the reopening of the Rafah border crossing. The trip to Rafah could take several hours. Egypt has said that the crossing remained open from the Egyptian side in recent days, but was rendered inoperable due to Israeli bombardments on the Palestinian side. Assistance that had come from several countries and organizations has been stalled in Al Arish, waiting for an agreement on the delivery of aid and evacuation of foreign nationals, which U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said had been achieved after a visit to Cairo, the Egyptian capital. Let's get more on this. On the Egyptian side is VOA correspondent Edward Yeranian, who joins us on the program now. Edward, thank you for joining us today. Right,
My
so
pleasure,
let's
Joe.
begin with what exactly is the situation at the Rafah border crossing currently. We understand thousands of Palestinians looking to leave Gaza are gathered there amidst reports of a reopening despite previous Israeli airstrikes.
Well, the Arab news media is reporting that there were strikes very shortly before their top-of-the-hour newscast. Now, I, not being on the spot, couldn't tell you exactly the intensity of those airstrikes and how far away from many people, or very many people, or we would have heard about it by now, given the fact that there are correspondents on the ground. But earlier, maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, correspondents on both sides of the border, the Palestinian side, which is mostly inaccessible except to journalists that are accredited by Hamas, they were saying that there was severe damage to the town, damage to the roadways that would be taken by people and trucks and taxis or whatever would be going through those crossings. That being said, we saw trucks, according to video, earlier in the day, so obviously they were able to get through. I don't know how much of it is exaggerated reporting, because as I said, on the Palestinian side, Hamas pretty much accredits all of the journalists, and the ones that they don't accredit, they've thrown out. So it's impossible to tell how accurate that information is. But you've seen video yourself, you broadcast it, and you see that people are suffering, people are waiting there. I don't know what they would have done if the attacks came close to the terminal, since there were a lot of people there. I sincerely hope that many people were hurt.
And if eventually the crossing is reopened, you've expressed hope that people will be able to go through. But, at this point in time, we do not know. And I may ask, because last week Egypt rejected opening the corridors for civilians. It said it would only allow just the humanitarian aid. So if the crossing is allowed to open, do we know at this time what or who can go through?
Well, having been through this exercise on multiple occasions since 2008, which I guess was the first Israeli military action against Gaza, I think all the parties involved are playing games in terms of who they want to let through. And they're pressuring the other parties by saying, well, Hamas would like to let some of their people go through, so you can't let your people go through unless we let some of our people go through. And Egypt doesn't want a mass inflow of refugees because it's already got at least 500,000 Sudanese that have come in the last 6 months, in addition to all the millions that have been here before. So Egypt risks being overwhelmed, in addition to the fact that they don't want a Palestinian state developing in the northern Sinai region, which is a long-standing position of Egypt. And if a lot of Palestinians were to leave Gaza, imagine if there was a mass outflow, then the entire Palestinian question or cause would be changed according to the Arab side. Now, I'm supposed to be neutral on this, so I'm not going to give my own opinion on that. But in any case, their position is Palestinians should remain in Palestine, and Gaza is part of Palestine. One of the big problems, of course, which the media isn't pointing out, is this border crossing at Rafah was supposed to be manned by UN or international monitors, and since 2007, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip, there have been no international monitors. So that there is a logistic reason why the Israelis would be upset about things going through the crossing without being monitored.
Right, and there may be so many reasons why the crossing may not be open just yet. And I put this to you, could this be one of them? Does Egypt have the capacity to receive refugees?
Well, it has been receiving refugees, has been receiving people from Gaza over the months. I mean,
how much
not
more?
In large quantities. That's a good question. I really don't know how much Egypt could take in terms of being saturated, but I don't think that's quite the question, because there are a lot of cities around Egypt, a lot of places where people could go. So I don't think it would be overwhelmed that quickly. But in terms of many of them staying in the Sinai, the worry is that some of the Hamas people that were being let in, if they were to be let in, would stay in the Sinai and might cause trouble politically.
And President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the weekend concerning the Israel-Hamas conflict. What more did both leaders talk about?
Well, I think each one put out the position of their governments, and I think President Sisi didn't want to be embarrassed in terms of not being patriotic. And I mean, the Palestinian cause is the mother of all causes, according to President Sisi. I think he said that 3 days ago, not with the visiting U.S. Secretary of State. But he also mentioned that Israel has killed a lot more Palestinians than have been Israelis were killed in the Israeli operation. Now, I don't really want to go there and who's right and who's wrong. But in terms of the number, so I guess he pointed that out. That was his point, not mine. And Mr. Blinken said that the attack by Hamas was appalling. I guess all of it's appalling, really.
And there have been, protests supporting Israel and Palestine all around the world. What is Egypt's position on the war, and how does the Egyptian public feel about what's currently going on in Israel today?
Well, the Egyptian government is saying that the Geneva Convention, which calls for treatment of civilians in times of war, must be respected. Of course, both parties need to be agree to these terms, and unfortunately Hamas is not considered a legal party because it doesn't legally control the Gaza Strip. And the Egyptian public, well, I think it's a bit divided. It's traditionally been very pro-Palestinian, but I don't see a lot of reaction in the streets. And I think people away from that sort of thing because they have other things to worry about. But certainly, if you talk to people, they're mostly sympathetic to the Palestinian people, at least, not particularly to Hamas, but to the people.
Right, VOA's Edward Yeranian speaking to us from Cairo in Egypt. Thank you for expanding that discussion and giving us updates from inside of Egypt, which is, set to receive more refugees as the Israel and Hamas war continues. Edward, thank you.
My pleasure, Joka.
And still to come on the program. Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo agree to allow visa-free travel between both countries. More details soon. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Sudan is marking 6 months anniversary of war between the country's military and a powerful paramilitary group, Rapid Support Forces, a conflict that has killed more than 5,000 people and forced 5 million others from their homes. As the conflict deepens, humanitarian conditions there are worsening, as is the promise of a long-awaited transition to democracy. Sudan has been engulfed in chaos since mid-April, when simmering tensions between military chief General Abdel Fattah Burhan and the commander of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, exploded into open warfare. The fighting initially centered in Khartoum, but quickly spread to other areas across the East African nation, including the already conflict-wrecked Western Darfur region. To other politics now, Liberia's election might be heading for a runoff as provisional results from nearly three-quarters of polling stations show only a slim margin between incumbent President George Weah and his main challenger, Joseph Boakai. Both candidates are virtually neck and neck as they race for the presidency. The country's National Elections Commission announced on Sunday that Mr. Weah has a narrow lead of 43.8% against Mr. Boakai's 43.5%, with about 73% of the votes already counted. In the meantime, the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, has warned against a declaration of premature victories, calling for all parties to uphold peace as they await the results. ECOWAS also adds that parties would be held accountable for any actions that could lead to violence and instability. At least 40 people have died and over 160 others missing after their boat capsized in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Search workers are looking for the 167 people still missing, while 189 survivors have been rescued after the boat sank in the Congo River. Officials say the boat was overloaded with more than 300 passengers and cargo and was sailing at night in breach of safety regulations. Boats are a common mode of transport in Democratic Republic of Congo because of the lack of roads. However, boat accidents are frequent due to overloading, a lack of maintenance, and traveling at night, which are all prohibited. Many passengers also do not wear life jackets. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says police have foiled a plot by Islamic State-linked militants to bomb churches in central Butambala district. According to Mr. Museveni, 2 bombs were linked to public address systems and sent to pastors disguised as gifts. Fortunately, members of the public became suspicious of the devices and told the police about them. The president has blamed the plot on the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, a militant group linked to Islamic State. The group has been blamed for a series of deadly attacks in Uganda, including the killing of more than 40 people, mostly students, at a boarding school in June. Well, travel between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo is about to get easier and become more seamless, as both nations have agreed to mutually abolish visa requirements to allow visa-free travel. The agreement follows recent talks between the two countries' officials in the DR Congo's capital, Kinshasa. Officials say this is aimed at easing the movement of people and strengthening trade between the two countries. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has for months been advocating for visa-free entry for the two countries. Both Uganda and Congolese nationals also previously complained about paying high visa fees at border crossings. As IMF World Bank meetings end in Marrakesh, Morocco, one of the sessions delved into a crucial and complex issue that impacts economies around the world and not just Africa. Just as international taxation landscape is rapidly evolving, a roundtable discussion took place which brought together tax experts, policymakers and representatives from G24 member countries to address the challenge and the opportunities.
A group of experts and leaders who have been discussing global tax policy reforms and the options available for G24 member countries. This panel session is crucial given the changing dynamics of the global economy and its impact on tax systems. The discussions kick off with the opening remarks from the Minister of Finance and Public Credit, Colombia, ICRICT Commissioner, underscoring the significance of fair and effective international taxation systems. They stressed the need for G24 member countries to actively participate in the ongoing global tax reform efforts.
That's the OECD for the toolkit it uses. And that's also an opportunity to assess what are the assumptions about what's going to be the evolution of the digital economy in the future.
Other panelists revealed the challenges faced by these countries in the current international taxation framework.
Inclusive framework on base erosion and profit shifting and global forum on transparency and exchange of information for tax purposes has led to international standards undoubtedly for BEPS and automatic exchange of financial account information. And in principle, everybody agrees with that. It's the underlying treatment that is an issue and the way it has been constructed.
Other participants engage in in-depth conversations about policy options for G24 member countries. They discuss the need for innovative tax measures, stronger domestic tax systems, potential benefits such as increased tax revenue and reduced tax competition, and regional cooperation to navigate the changing international tax landscape.
Developing countries, we need more internal resources, and the fact of having some multinational who not pay all the taxes they had to pay in our countries is a big problem. And specifically in a context where mobilizing resources become a very tough question for countries like ours. So we need to do our best to that the multinational pay what they have to pay for our countries.
The fact is, this global tax reform, the main aim was to put an end to tax avoidance, to reduce also tax competition between countries, and with all that, to contribute to increased revenue collection in every country, developing and developed economies, but also to contribute to reduce inequalities, because it would recover also fairness in the design of international taxation. This tax system was completely outdated, and it was designed 100 years ago more in response to the interest of rich economies. Now what we need is a system that is fit for purpose for the reality of business in the 21st century, but it also responding to the needs, to the interest of other economies and not just the rich countries.
As this roundtable wraps off, it's clear that international taxation is a complex and critical issue that requires the collaboration of nations to address. The insights and recommendations generated will play a pivotal role in shaping the policies and strategies of G24 member countries in the ever-evolving global tax.
That's Network Africa today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers. Bye for now.